This is Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States and the Democrat presidential nominee for 2024, who lost to the 45th and soon-to-be 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, which means that America is about to be unburdened by what has been. But how did we get here? Well, let's take a look back at the presidential campaign of Kamala Harris. During her 2019 presidential run, Kamala was against fossil fuels and fracking. She was for decriminalizing illegal border crossings. She was strongly against a border wall. She wanted to eliminate private insurance. She was in favor of defunding the police. And she supported mandatory buybacks of assault weapons. But conveniently, in 2024, she wasn't for any of those things. For example, Harris's campaign stated that Kamala would in fact not ban fracking. But having an anonymous spokesperson type out a statement is not good enough. Americans want to know why and how she came to that decision and hear it directly from Kamala, which is something that she could not and would not explain.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020, that I would not ban fracking. As vice president, I did not ban fracking. As president, I will not ban fracking.
But this was a lie. She never said that she would not ban fracking on the debate stage or otherwise.
In 2019, I believe, at a town hall, you said you were asked, would you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking on your first day in office? And you said, there's no question, I'm in favor of banning fracking. So yes. So it changed in that campaign?
In 2020, I made very clear where I stand. We are in 2024, and I've not changed that position, nor will I going forward. I kept my word, and I will keep my word.
What made you change that position at the time?
Well, let's be clear. My values have not changed.
So her position has changed, but her values haven't, which is political doublespeak for, I'm not gonna ban it, I'm just gonna slowly regulate it out of existence. And she had a similar non-answer when it comes to your Second Amendment rights.
I'm not trying to take everyone's guns away. I'm in favor of the Second Amendment, and I'm in favor of assault weapons bans.
Listen carefully to what she's saying. She's not trying to take everyone's guns away, just the guns which you own that she deems to be an assault weapon. Also, you can't be pro-Second Amendment and anti-gun. And then there's her stance on building a wall on the southern border.
But you do want to build some wall.
I want to strengthen our border.
Translation? President Kamala Harris wasn't going to build a single inch of border wall. And arguably, the most effective political ad of the 2024 campaign was attacking Kamala Harris's position on providing special surgeries for federal prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system.
But when Kamala says she would follow the law, she is misinterpreting it. The law requires that federal prisoners receive medically necessary health care. In other words, the law states that a prisoner's surgery must be paid for if it is deemed medically necessary, not paying for your new vagina.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment
I will
surgeries?
follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads.
You're damn right they did. Because when people found out about this special treatment for criminals, they were rightfully disturbed. And Kamala Harris wouldn't speak out against it because she didn't want to offend anyone. That decision ultimately lost Kamala Harris votes from moderate Democrats independents, and Black and Latino voters, and helped push Trump over the finish line to not only win the election, but also the popular vote. Another reason why Kamala Harris lost is because of her policy agenda, which was light on policy. And what she was proposing didn't connect with most voters. For starters, she promised $25,000 in mortgage assistance for first-time homebuyers. But as you may already know, inflation is caused by too many dollars chasing too few goods. That extra Kamala money would increase demand and contribute to inflated home prices because we currently have an issue with low inventory. Not to mention that sellers would likely increase prices since they know that buyers will have an extra $25,000 to spend. And of course, Kamala's policy doesn't help Americans who already own a home, but details. And it should be mentioned that the minimum down payment for an FHA loan is only about 3.5% as long as your credit score is above 580. If it's lower than that, a 10% down payment is required. And pro tip, if that's the case and your credit score is that poor, you probably shouldn't be looking to make a home purchase anytime soon. Next, Kamala proposed a $50,000 tax deduction for new small businesses, which seems like a magnet for tax fraud in my opinion, but what do I know? However, not every American is interested in starting a small business, nor do most Americans have the business acumen to do so. Besides, they're more worried about being able to put food on the table and pay their bills. Then Kamala proposed the first ever federal ban on corporate price gouging on groceries. In her policy book, Kamala said that she'll instruct her administration to focus on investigating and prosecuting price fixing, where companies illegally collude to set prices up and down food supply chains. And this policy applies to no one because A, there is no price gouging. And, even if there was, then why didn't the Biden-Harris administration investigate price gouging? I mean, they had nearly 4 years. The only thing that was stopping them was the fact that it didn't exist. But case in point, during the Oprah Winfrey town hall, which cost Kamala Harris $1 million in campaign funds, a young couple asked Kamala what her plan was to lower the cost of living.
So, Madam Vice President, we are, like many, many young Americans, just experiencing a very high cost of living. Now here we are, and our mortgage is incredibly higher than what we thought it would be. And we really would love to know what your plan is to help lower the cost of living.
Unfortunately for Rachel and Garrett here, Kamala doesn't have a plan to help them. All she could offer was a word salad.
Yours is a story I hear around the country as I travel. And in terms of both rightly having the right to have aspirations and dreams and ambitions for your family, and working hard and finding that the American dream is, for this generation and so many recently, far more elusive than it's been. And we need to deal with that. And there are a number of ways. One is bringing down the cost of everyday necessities, including groceries. So that's why I'm taking on, for example, price gouging, which is when, most companies and corporations are good, but for those bad ones, they take advantage of people.
So if most companies and corporations are good, then who is exactly price gouging Rachel and Garrett? Oh, right, no one.
But it's also about dealing with what we need to do around home ownership. Look, I grew up a child of a mother who worked very hard. She raised me and my sister, and she saved up, and by the time I was a teenager, she was able to buy a home, which is why part of my plan is for first-time homeowners, buyers, to have a $25,000 down payment assistance to buy your first home.
However, that $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time homeowners doesn't help Rachel and Garrett because they already own a home. Was Kamala not listening to their story?
Part of my plan is what we need to do to support small businesses, because my second mother was a small business owner, and I love our small businesses and our small business owners.
But Kamala's small business policies don't apply to this couple either, as Rachel works at a nonprofit and Garrett is an insurance underwriter. Everything that Kamala has mentioned is not going to lower Rachel and Garrett's costs in any way. But I'm sure that they were super grateful to hear the story about how Kamala's mother was able to save up and buy a home 45 years ago. That'll pay the bills. Next, there were Kamala Harris's campaign surrogates, high-profile names that were supposed to publicly speak on behalf of Kamala. But these surrogates ended up being more harmful than helpful. First, you had Jeffrey Epstein's best friend, former President Bill Clinton.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened.
Clinton reminding voters about the failure of the Biden-Harris administration to secure the border, it's kind of like an in-kind donation to the Trump campaign. And then you had former President Barack Obama, who decided to scold members of the black community for supporting Donald Trump.
I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. Because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable. This shouldn't even be a question.
Nothing like being called a misogynist for not wanting to vote for a woman who just happens to be the worst presidential candidate since Hillary Clinton. And don't worry, ladies, Democrats have disdain for you too.
Donald Trump, you never see him around strong, intelligent women, ever. It's just that simple. They're intimidating to him. He doesn't like to be challenged by them.
So Rachel Maddow here basically insulted every woman who was supporting Trump, especially considering that according to exit polls conducted by the Associated Press, 46% of women cast their ballot for Trump. But according to some, it was probably the last election where they would ever be able to vote.
If we don't show up tomorrow, it is entirely possible that we will not have the opportunity to ever cast a ballot again.
Wow, I can't believe that billionaire Oprah Winfrey scaremongering didn't get Kamala elected. But the coup de grace came from the sitting resident of the United States, who decided that it would be wise to insult half the country days before an election.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Nothing like calling half the country garbage to get them even more enthusiastic to turn out and vote for your opponent. Easily one of the biggest miscalculations by the Kamala Harris campaign was her choice of running mate. She needed someone who could help win states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, where Governor Josh Shapiro was the obvious choice, but that would have alienated the from the river to the sea people. Anyway, she chose Governor Tim Walz from Minnesota. Waves like this. Men don't wave like this. Hell, women don't wave like this. And not only is Tim Walz one of the most off-putting politicians in recent memory, but he quickly became a major liability. It was revealed that he lied about his military record, claiming that he was a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom, lied about the rank that he retired at, and most egregiously, lied about serving in combat.
I want to ask you a question about how you've described your service in the National Guard. You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do.
So Tim Walz's excuse for lying was, I speak like everyone else. His constant misspeaking did massive harm to the Harris Knucklehead campaign. But that's what happens when you only have 2 weeks to vet a candidate.
I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves. My wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar is not always correct.
And then it was revealed that Walz said that he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre, but that was also a lie.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Discrepancy? It's not a discrepancy, it's a lie. But whatever. Now let's watch Tim Walz give the absolute worst response in the history of vice presidential debates.
Look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service.
So the question was, why did you lie about your experience in China? And Walz's answer? I used to ride my bike with my friends, which according to Tim Walz is service of some kind.
Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric.
So Kamala Harris picked a running mate who was a lying knucklehead with bad grammar who wears his emotions on his sleeve and lied for decades about his military service. And we're supposed to trust her judgment and make her the leader of the free world. Got it. And there were even more lies. He claimed he was a football coach who turned a losing team into state champions when he was only a defensive coordinator. It was revealed that he had given multiple versions of the story of his drunken driving arrest and even allowed his campaign staff to lie about it to the public. And then he claimed that he and his wife used in vitro fertilization when they didn't. And speaking of his wife, it turns out that Gwen Walz is a f***ing psychopath.
You just show me this. Turn the page, right? Turn the page. And you know what else that looks like? Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Donald Trump. We are turning the page. 52 days and we are turning the page. 52 days and it is bye-bye, Donald Trump. That's right.
One of my least favorite parts of covering this election cycle was having to watch Kamala Harris give campaign speeches. But ultimately, I didn't really even have to because every speech was a copy-paste of the previous speech. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here's Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks.
Every single rally speech was pathetic. It was the same speech every single time, the same message every single time.
I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with a working mother who kept a strict budget. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with a working mother who kept a strict budget. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood with a working mother who kept a strict budget. I come from the middle class. I know what I'm talking about. I come from the middle class. I come from the middle class.
She's awkward. She's uncomfortable in her own skin.
Okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that.
No passion behind it, no real genuine or no sincerity behind it.
Prices for everyday things like groceries are still too high. You know it and I know it. While inflation is down and wages are up, prices are still too high. You know it and I know it. You know it and I know it. You know it and I know it. You know it and I know it.
It was just a robotic, weird, over-rehearsed speech, and it was the same speech again and again and again.
Someone who suggests we should terminate the Constitution of the United States should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. Never again.
But of course, Kamala's biggest problem was being an integral part of the Biden-Harris administration, and Americans had had enough with 4 years of record inflation, record interest rates, record high gas and energy prices, and record spending that resulted in a record $7.9 trillion added to the national debt. And despite promises of a new way forward, Kamala Harris wasn't convincing anyone.
If anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
This was pretty much the moment that cost Kamala Harris the election. Polls had consistently shown that voters overwhelmingly believe that the country is going in the wrong direction. But Kamala Harris is such an incredibly unskilled politician, the best response she could give was, all of our decisions have been great, and I've been a part of most of them.
Well, there was a lot that was done, but there's more to do, Anderson. And I'm pointing out things that need to be done, that haven't been done, but need to be done. And I'm not going to shy away from saying, hey, these are still problems that we need to fix.
Don't worry, honey. The adults are back to fix everything that you and Brandon broke. Which means, my fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time, if there is a next time.